It's Friday, the 30th of August, 2024.
The last word in podcasting news. This is the Pod News Weekly Review with James Cridland and Sam Sethi.
Yes, back in sunny Brisbane, I'm James Cridland, the editor of Pod News.
And I'm Sam Sethi, the CEO of True Fans.
In the chapters today, Descript launches Season 7 with Rooms, Wondery keeps on buying things, Apple Podcasts and their market share continues to drop, and Libsyn sells another company, plus...
I'm Mignon Fogarty, and later I will be talking about 18 years in podcasting.
She will. This podcast is sponsored by Buzzsprout with the tools, support and community to make sure you keep podcasting. Start podcasting, keep podcasting with Buzzsprout.
From your daily newsletter, the Pod News Weekly Review.
James, so this week Wondery's off purchasing more podcasts. What are they doing?
They are. Blimey. They've definitely got large pockets. Have the good folks at Amazon's Wondery. Yes, they ended up buying the New Heights with Jason and Travis Kelce podcast, which were rumoured back in May. Interestingly, they bought it and then instantly released a new episode because it's the beginning of the NFL season. Listen to me as if I know what I'm talking about. The deal is said to be worth more than $100 million over 3 years.
So, okay, I'm confused. They've done Smartless, they've done Dax Shepard, they're going down the road. Didn't Spotify try this and fail abysmally?
Well, and so I believe that Smartless has now left them, but yes, you're right. They have they're doing a number of different things. What they're basically doing, firstly, is that they are obviously selling ads. That's the number one thing. Jason Travis Kelce's show was a number 4 show back in the first quarter of this year, number 12 show, I think from memory. No, number 14 show in the last quarter. So arguably it's already peaked. But anyway, it's still a very large show. So they want to sell the ads in there. They also want new shows to add to the Wondery Plus app that Wondery operates, and so clearly adding more content to there will help. And then they are looking at merchandise, they're looking at live events, and they're also looking at taking the show and translating it into, well, at least into 3 languages, German, Portuguese and Spanish, because that's where the NFL fans are. And so, yeah, so they seem to be covering a fair amount of this stuff.
I assume it's in Australia as well, James, available for you to listen to?
Yeah, well, you'd have thought that. Weirdly, it doesn't appear to be available at all on Apple Podcasts. I don't quite understand why that would be the case, but if you try searching for it, if you are connected to the Apple Podcasts Australian store, as I am, then it doesn't actually appear. And I've checked that with a few other people, including Russell Harrower, friend of the show, and he can't see it either when he's connected to the Australian store, but you can when you're connected to the US store. Not quite sure what's going on there. Frankly, I don't think that Apple do either. So so we'll find out what's going on there.
No NFL fans in Australia, maybe.
Well, we've got Aussie rules football, mate. That's you don't need any of this NFL nonsense.
Yeah, that's not the same sport, mate.
Is it not?
The same sport.
I don't know.
No. Yes, similar round a ball, but that's about it.
I'm not even sure the ball is round, is it?
Well, it's ellipsed. Yes, it's an ellipsed ball.
Yeah.
Okay, let's leave our sports show to another day.
Sports knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, look, this show grew because of his relationship with Taylor Swift. Audience were growing by 4.5 times because of the relationship. Now, that's all the Swifties going there. And I can't imagine 16-year-old girls being heavily into NFL on a major cycle. I mean, why? I mean, that's the growth, isn't it? Everyone went, oh, let's go and join that because it's Taylor Swift's boyfriend.
Yeah, I'm absolutely convinced that that's the case. And I'm absolutely convinced that that's why the show peaked in quarter one when the relationship was brand new. I mean, only yesterday you will have noticed that I covered in the Pod News Daily a number of different headlines from the online press. One of them: fans predict baby's first words after early exposure to Jason and Travis Kelce's podcast. Some poor baby is being played this podcast in the cot while they try and go to sleep.
Jeez.
I know. Another one, Swifties believe Taylor Swift's cat meows in the background of Travis Kelce's New Heights episode. That's from US Magazine. And from USA Today, Travis Kelce makes a very demure reference on the New Heights podcast, and fans loved it. I'm not quite sure what very demure is. I'm guessing it's another Taylor Swift reference. It's all Taylor Swift stuff. And as you say, I am not sure. I mean, firstly, I don't wish to say anything bad about that relationship, but Taylor Swift is on boyfriend number 12. That's absolutely fine. A young lady like that can have as many boyfriends as you want. But at some point, that relationship may not continue. And in which case, what does that mean for this particular show? And also, as you rightly say, as soon as the relationship went public, the numbers for this show went up by 4.5 times. Also, the show's demographic changed from being 2/3 male to 50% female. So very clearly, the Taylor Swift effect has had a thing here. And I wonder, to be blunt, I wonder whether or not this show's time has already come. And I also wonder whether or not Wondery have overpaid, given that, one of the Kelce brothers is retiring from NFL, I think. And then, of course, you've got the whole Taylor Swift saga. So, yeah, I find it a very peculiar thing.
I hope their lawyers have got a breakup contract there. I mean, if she does break up with him, I wonder if they can get some of that 100 million back.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that she would say. She would say that they were never, ever, ever getting back together.
Oh my God, you have been so indoctrinated, haven't you?
I do have an 11-year-old girl, so yes. The answer's yes.
But I genuinely, I was thinking in my head, I wonder if Taylor Swift's breakup album would be worth more than the cost of this podcast. Who knows?
Well, and one person has said that the amount of money that Wondery have paid is more than they would have got from their NFL salaries, which may or may not be true. I don't know. It is a large amount of money. It's the third largest licensing deal so far this year. Smartless is now with SiriusXM. They paid $100 million for that show. You might remember that last week Alex Cooper was announced, SiriusXM buying that show, Call Her Daddy, for $125 million. And then, of course, Joe Rogan re-signing only earlier on this year with Spotify for $250 million, or if you prefer it better that way, 1/8 of the entire podcast industry. So I just find them fascinating. Yeah, it's a really strange, massive numbers.
Isn't the first sign of madness doing the same thing time and time again and hoping for a different result? Because clearly, how are they going to, even if you sell advertising till the cows come home, you are not getting $125 million back in value.
No, I mean, so the argument goes that there will be a lot of people wanting to advertise on those podcasts. And so what you do as a sales network is you say, yes, of course you can advertise on New Heights, but in order to advertise on New Heights, you need to buy a network buy. And that network buy will also include some of the other shows that we're not actually selling so well. So, you end up basically using New Heights as a way to get new advertisers in, and as a network sell with a bunch of other shows that aren't selling quite so well. That, I think, is the plan. And you can see, for something like Joe Rogan, there is an argument to say that was quite successful in that, you basically got no access to that show unless you advertised on a bunch of others.
Did he sign his contract? I thought that was still up for grabs.
Yeah, I think he re-signed earlier on this year. And, I mean, what I find interesting is 250 million earlier on this year. And Adam Curry, if he's listening, will be saying, it's all, all these numbers are nonsense because, they've all got targets to hit and it's over 3 years and et cetera, et cetera. But the fact remains 250 million. The previous deal, when Rogan was a exclusive to Spotify, was 200 million apparently. So Spotify paid even more this time round, and have actually arguably got rather less because that show is now available everywhere and also available on YouTube. So so who knows quite what's going on there.
Is it available on YouTube without ads?
I would imagine that it's available on YouTube with the ads that you're allowed to do on YouTube. So, you and I could mention a sponsorship by Buzzsprout and so on and so forth, but there wouldn't be any programmatic ads, put in the middle of it. No.
Now, you've been talking to somebody else recently as well, James. Who's that?
Yeah, I've been talking to Mignon Fogarty. There've been a few special dates this month. One date, Dave Slusher, who celebrated 20 years of podcasting. You might know Dave Slusher as the first podcaster to ever use the word podcast in a podcast. I know, meta. So he celebrated his 20 years of podcasting, and if you find his Evil Genius Chronicles, wherever you get your podcasts, you'll hear a special episode from him. He reckons he runs the longest continuous podcast, and who am I not to agree with that? Meanwhile, 18 years of podcasting for Mignon Fogarty, and she has been podcasting for 18 years. I wondered what kind of changes that she had seen in the podcast industry and whether things were for the better. So I caught up with her a little earlier this month and I asked her firstly what her podcast, Grammar Girl, is all about.
Well, it started as a quick tip about writing, a quick and dirty tip to help you write better. Today, it's about language and everything that is exciting and fun about language, as well as the quick tips.
And I noticed I was listening to a recent episode all about accents and singing, and why Adele sings in an English accent, or rather an American accent, when she speaks in a very English accent, and all of that.
Wasn't that fascinating?
Yeah, which was really, really interesting, which I really enjoyed. And one of the things that I found fascinating, and, having been in podcasting for 18 years, the first thing that I heard was an advertisement for the Gold Coast University, which is just down the road from me here in Australia.
Wow.
And I was there thinking, you must have seen an awful lot of change in podcasting in the last 18 years. What's the biggest changes that you've seen?
Yeah, it's funny that you would mention that because I do think dynamic ad insertion is one of the biggest changes that at least has had the biggest effect on my business and what I do. The meat of what I do, producing the podcast, hasn't changed that much, really. But with dynamic ad insertion, well, I'm also the founder of the Quick and Dirty Tips podcast network, and the nature of our shows, like what I do with language, and we have parenting and health tips and nutrition tips, it's all evergreen. And so we have a massive archive of episodes that are still live and get a lot of traffic. And so our ability to monetize that backlist, has just made all the difference in being a going concern, having a business.
Yeah, so how has advertising changed for you in the last 18 years? Can you remember who your first advertiser was?
Oh my gosh. I know in the early days, Audible was there in the beginning, very early on. I don't know if they were the first, but they were they probably advertised on the show for 10 years at least. They were a huge early supporter. And then I remember very early on, we had a couple of movies advertising. I should be able to remember. Stomp the Yard. Stomp the Yard was a movie that advertised in Grammar Girl, like way back in the very early days.
Wow, why don't movies advertise in podcasts anymore? Or maybe they do in the US, I don't know.
I haven't had one in, I can't even, that was probably the last one.
Yeah, wow. And so advertising back then, I'm guessing, was were they supplied to you as a spot, or would you host read, or how did advertising work?
Oh, they were all host read. In fact, that was for a long time. I mean, I would say it's only, oh gosh, I lose track of time, but maybe the last 6 or 7 years where we've had pre-recorded ads. I mean, it feels like not that long ago that I had to record ads every week, and I don't have a single ad to record myself. I don't think this month. It's all pre-recorded and dynamically inserted, which actually saves me a huge amount of time.
So you say that the way that you make your show hasn't changed that much. You're not using AI or any of these new fancy tools?
Well, the tools have gotten better, but, I still research the topic, write a script, record that script, and then we produce it in an audio program. Like the meat of it hasn't changed, but all the technology around it has. I was thinking about that. It is so much easier to do an interview than it used to be. We have Squadcast and Riverside and all the Clean Feed, all the various tools to record interviews. None of that existed when I started. It was much harder to do an interview. I used to transcribe my interviews by hand.
Wow.
That took hours, and now that is AI. We used a script and it just pops out a transcript, and it's not perfect. And, because my show is Grammar Girl, I still have to edit it. But,
Yes, of course.
It saves hours of time.
So what are the big changes? I mentioned advertising, but what are the big changes that you've seen over the past 18 years? And has podcasting, I guess the question, has podcasting changed for the better?
I think it has. I mean, I think the fact that it's easier to make a show and it's easier to financially support a show. It's not just advertising, it's listener support, like through, Patreon and Apple Podcast subscriptions. And, I do something called Subtext where people subscribe and I send them a text message a couple times a week with a fun language tip. There are just so many more ways to support a show, whether you're a big show or a small show. I think that's a huge plus for the industry because it means that more people can produce podcasts. We also have to compete more with other people. Certainly, there are many more celebrities in podcasting than when I started. There were a couple back then. There was, Penn Jillette and Kevin Smith were pretty early. But today, is there a celebrity who doesn't have a podcast today? I'm not sure there is. So.
No, I think you're right. And you mentioned video. Of course, video. I was going to say it's one of the things that's changed. I'm not sure it is. I mean, I was watching Leo Laporte, maybe not 18 years ago, but certainly quite some time ago, doing that show in video in Apple Podcasts. And Apple Podcasts still supports video. But are you doing much more video now than you used to?
Yeah. Again, I messed around with video in the very early days too, so it's not brand new. But again, it is a lot easier to do than it used to be. Now we have iPhones and everyone knows how to do video because of TikTok and Reels and YouTube, and it's just easier. And it is, it's interesting. I feel like it's expected now to have a video component to your podcast. And that's a lot of extra work. It's also fun. I love technology, so it's been really fun learning how to do video and buying the equipment and setting up my studio and, all the fun tech stuff. But I don't know if that drives people to the audio podcast either, which is what I consider it's my home base.
Yeah.
It's the primary outlet.
Do you think video kind of gets in the way of making a podcast, or is it just sort of something that we have to do these days?
I don't think it gets in the way. And I do think it's nice for when you're interviewing someone to be able to see their face and, get the reaction and maybe know when you can jump in more safely or something like that. But I don't think it takes away from it. I think the biggest negative would probably be that people feel intimidated by it. So maybe they don't start podcasting because they think they have to do video. And you don't have to,
But yeah, I do wonder how many new podcasters are there buying cameras and buying lighting and, dressing up their offices and everything else, or their recording spaces for the video side, given how little video for most podcasts, how little video actually changes the amount of people who consume it.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I mean, I feel really pressured to do it, but I can't tell you why. It doesn't. Yeah. I don't feel like it changes anything. And if you're out there listening and you're worried about it to start, it's true. You absolutely don't have to do it.
Yeah. So looking forward, how do you think that the industry is going to change in the next 18 years? And what do you hope that the industry will change to?
Oh my gosh. I really wonder what role AI is going to play. I think that's the biggest new technology on the horizon. I remember when the internet was new and that changed everything. And I remember when podcasting is new, and for me, that changed everything. I feel like AI is at least that level of a new technology, and it's going to be really hard to predict how it's going to change things. I'm watching the voice AI really closely, and I haven't used it in my show, but I play with it because I think it's important to understand what it can and can't do. And I read about it, listen to things all the time, and I think that it probably will play a role. I mean, in 18 years, I think for sure it's going to play a role. Yeah. I just can't really predict what it's going to be.
Indeed. And the Quick and Dirty Tips Podcast Network, tell me more about that. How long has that been going?
Oh, that's been going 18 years too. I started it almost at the same time as Grammar Girl. When Grammar Girl took off, I launched Grammar Girl, and it was, number one at iTunes within like 6 weeks. It was nuts. And so I had spent time in Silicon Valley at startups. And so I knew when you had an audience that big, you had a business. I didn't know what that business was at that time, because there wasn't really advertising back then yet. But I launched a network and hired some of my friends to do shows in the network. We had 6 or 7 shows before I partnered with Macmillan. And they really took over, especially in 2009. They fully took over, and they manage the whole network now and have grown it to what it is today.
So how did the Macmillan partnership start then?
Yeah, they approached me about a book.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Grammar Girl was the web pick of the day in the Wall Street Journal, and multiple publishers approached me about book deals. And I was, at the time, the network had grown beyond really what I could handle, and I was looking for a partner. So I pitched them back and said, well, how about we form a partnership to grow this network? And they loved the idea.
Makes a load of sense. Well, so many congratulations. 18 years ago today, the 30th of August. So if someone wants to learn more about you and Grammar Girl and the Quick and Dirty Tips Podcast Network, where would they go?
Yeah, I would say probably just go to Google and search Grammar Girl, and you will get to all the things you would want to know. Or you can find me on social media. I'm on, as you said, Mastodon as Grammar Girl at Zirk.us. I'm on Threads as The Grammar Girl. I'm on Blue Sky as Grammar Girl. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn as Grammar Girl. So I'm very findable.
You've got all the badges for all of the social networks.
I do. And YouTube. I forgot YouTube.
Oh, yes. It's probably important as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
There we go, Mignon Fogarty. And you can hear a longer version of that interview with James on Pod News Extra.
Yes, and the show recently also concluded a season of bonus interview episodes. If you're a fan of word nerds, then you will like it. The author of Dune, Kevin J. Anderson, the famed Dune narrator, Scott Brick, there's a name, and Dr. Sonia Lanehart as well, who is the advisor to the Oxford Dictionary of African American English. So you can check that out in Grammar Girl.
The Pod News Weekly Review with Buzzsprout. Podcast hosting made easy.
Moving on, James, Libsyn reports that another new low for Apple Podcast downloads. What are they saying?
Yes, they are saying 46.7% of all downloads for shows on Libsyn, which is a new historical low for Apple Podcasts. And you might be thinking, well, it'll all be fixed now that Apple Podcasts has that fancy new web player. Well, no. The fancy new web player is currently doing 0.3% of the downloads from the app, according to OP3, which is about 450 downloads from it a day in comparison to, tens of thousands. So, it doesn't seem to be moving the needle yet, but, there's still plenty of time, I'm sure.
Is everyone reporting it correctly now?
Yeah, I mean, more and more people are reporting it correctly. Castos is now reporting it, as well as a bunch of other web-based players, so TrueFans, correctly. And actually, I think quite a lot of this is good news for web-based players like TrueFans, because if you can measure the Apple Podcasts web player correctly, then you should be able to measure all of these, web-based players correctly. So just download the list from the OPORG GitHub, and you should be away. So OSHA, Buzzsprout, Spreaker, Captivate, Transistor, RSS.com have also put a code change out to monitor it correctly, as well as OP3 are using those, so you can actually see how that platform is going for you. I have to say, I have spotted a few bugs, and they are bugs particularly if you don't live in the US. So it doesn't seem to work very well when you link to it, because it automatically goes to the US catalogue rather than the catalogue wherever you happen to be. And that sometimes causes a problem with some shows which are available in some countries but not in others. But it also causes a problem when you're trying to buy a premium subscription. If you try buying a premium, well, firstly, you might not even see it there if you're in the wrong store, but also secondly, you certainly won't be able to actually buy it or even play the episode in some cases. So I'm not sure that it's been 100% checked before it was thrown live, but perhaps they needed to throw it live on the week of Podcast Movement, I guess.
Another thing you wrote about this week was David Oxenford was saying that it's important for you to disclose your sponsors. So our sponsor is Buzzsprout. And he's a media lawyer. And I think this is really interesting because a few years ago, Instagram influencers were being pulled up quite heavily by advertising standards groups, saying that you cannot promote a product unless you declare your relationship to that product. And I think David Oxenford is saying the same thing for podcasters. Yeah,
pretty well. I mean, there are a few changes in FTC rules over the next couple of months, which basically mean that the FTC can now fine you rather more if you don't, and if you're not clear in saying that if it's sponsored, you should say that it is sponsored. So you will notice every time we mention the Buzzsprout word, we will always say our sponsor in this particular show, because they are, and thank them for doing that. What David Oxenford is also suggesting is that, you need to basically, if you've been given something that you mention, then you should disclose the fact that you were given it. So there's all of that kind of stuff that you just need to be careful of. The rules do change, though, in early October, which basically means that the FTC can come after you if you're American and fine you, which is quite a thing. So just something just to bear in mind, I guess, and and clearly also making sure that you're not promoting something, trying to claim that you are using a product which you absolutely aren't. So if you remember, there was somebody who was getting paid an awful lot by Samsung to promote a new Galaxy phone, and they tweeted a photograph, and they put hashtag Samsung, hashtag Galaxy phone. Anyway, if you were to look at the at the photograph, then you would have seen that it was taken with an iPhone. So a lot of these fake consumer reviews and things. What it does also mean, by the way, is that if you are using one of those podcast promoters, I will love your podcast long time. Then you just need to be careful, because that is, strictly speaking, now illegal under FTC guidelines. If you know that they are buying false customer reviews, false customer stars, or even download numbers, because even those are a social media influence tool. You just need to be careful.
So if I give a rating to this podcast on Apple Podcasts and never listen to it, is that a false rating?
I mean, I would argue, it depends, really. You might listen to it on Overcast and then switch over to Apple Podcasts just to rate it, and in which case that's absolutely fine. I think if you are employing an army of 200 people in Bangladesh just to put 5 stars on this particular show, then that is not really a very acceptable thing.
I think Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, has also just had his knuckles rapped for not revealing his investment in Huel, which is the product he promotes throughout that podcast.
Yes, indeed. So the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK has a very similar rule. I think they lack some of the, some of the opportunities of fining you, which the FTC has. But nevertheless, the ASA also has a number of these rules, as I'm guessing would the ACCC here in Australia. So, again, just being honest and open is probably a good thing.
Let's whiz around the world a little bit, James.
Oh, let's.
Now, in India, Gaana, the Indian podcast and music app, has been acquired by ENIL, the owner of Radio Mirchi. In fact, they're both the same thing, really, and they're all part of the same group, the Times India Internet, the Times India. I spoke to Gautam Anand from Hubhopper to find out more about this, actually, because I don't know enough about it. And basically what it was is Gaana used to have lots of Chinese investment from Tencent and others. That's now stopped and dried up because the Indian government won't allow Chinese investment into India because of the ongoing dispute between the two countries. And so they literally are doing a fire sale for the brand name only, and that's the only value. And they're using the Times of India sales team to sell both radio and podcasting ads. But he thinks it's just literally a end-of-life sale,
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. The sale in inverted commas was $30,000. It's hardly anything. There is something weird going on with the Times of India group, which is actually called Bennett Coleman. Something a little bit weird going on with that, in that entire company is splitting in two. One of the brothers is taking the newspaper with him, the Times of India, which is the biggest English-speaking newspaper in the world. And the other, one of the brothers, is taking the TV and radio stuff with him. And so Times Internet, my understanding, is going away because they need to work out who owns what. Hence why Times Internet has essentially sold it to ENIL, which is the owner of Radio Mirchi. So it's a very complicated thing, but also, it's costing them an arm and a leg to keep going. They ended up giving the company $2 million in funding just in quarter 1 of this year. So Gaana is not in particularly good shape. And one of their competitors, Wink, WYNK, Wink has closed in the last week. So that again is another Indian music and podcast app, and that has closed its doors. That was run by Airtel, one of the other mobile phone companies. So my suspicion, what's going on in the Indian world, is firstly Spotify is actually closing all of these things because Spotify is available there, and they see that as being a market market that they want to jump into. But also, it's actually really hard to make money out of these things. And so Ghana, not in good shape. Wink just having closed. JioSaavn, which has a big mobile phone company behind that as well, is still going, but for how long? So I think it's a fascinating watch looking at what's going on in the Indian world.
It is. I think we'll keep a close eye on that one. Now, moving over to the Netherlands, Podimo's acquired a Dutch podcast company. Who's that, James?
Yes, it's called Tony Media. So now they have two Dutch podcast companies because they owned Dag en Nacht, Day and Night, which they bought last year. Podimo has also announced that it's profitable in the Netherlands, which is good news. I believe that it mostly sells subscription access to its shows. I think that that's the way that Podimo works. But interesting to see them still on the acquisition trail in the country, seemingly doing very nicely. And in Germany, this is a strange old thing. Do you remember Libsyn bought a company called Julep Media, which was a German podcast advertising company and a podcast host?
I do.
They bought them back in August 2022. Anyway, it turns out that Julep Media is now independent again. The original Julep management team bought the company back in March. Libsyn, surprisingly, has said nothing. David Mosler is the new CEO of Julep, and Julep's podcast hosting outfit has been spun off to a new company which is called Audiorella. Audiorella is IAB certified, well, rather Julep was, but Audiorella, I think, can now lay claim to being IAB certified. So again, that's an interesting divestment from Libsyn. My understanding is that it wasn't making any money. Well, it was losing money hands over fist, one person told me. So maybe that's a good thing that they are no longer part of the company. But so it does kind of point to Libsyn having this big growth, buying all kinds of different companies, and then all of a sudden they've shrunk back down to essentially running two companies, Libsyn Ads and the hosting company. They still own Glow. My understanding with Glow is that if you try to, Glow is kind of a bit like Patreon, but if you try and sign up to Glow, you get a couple of pages into the sign-up process, and then it says, oh, we're not taking any new customers at this time. So my understanding is that Glow has basically died, unless anybody knows different, in which case editor@podnews.net, I would be delighted to issue a correction. But I think, Libsyn is now very much focused on selling ads, which they see as their main focus, and also operating a heritage hosting company on the other side.
How long for? Do they have a new CEO yet?
They don't have a new CEO yet. I would imagine that their new CEO is going to be somebody from the advertising side. And, it wouldn't surprise me if the hosting portion, which I understand is still a very profitable and very, useful part of their business, is kind of run as a bit of an afterthought. Certainly my understanding is that all of the good coders are now working on the advertising side rather than on the hosting side. It may come not too much of a surprise if you've ever tried using it.
Linda Yaccarino from X probably needs a new job. Maybe she'll go there.
Maybe she will. Gosh, imagine.
Now, Podcast Movement, where you were last week, they've put out their highlights reel. You didn't make it, James.
I didn't, which I'm delighted at. I was speaking on stage, but I wasn't speaking on the big keynote stage. And in fact, I never even went into the keynote stage. So I never even saw it. But you can watch the highlights reel. I would find Podcast Movement on YouTube because they have started putting some of the keynotes on there as well. So you can also watch the good folks from Multitude, Amanda McLaughlin and Eric Silver, doing their keynote speech. You always knew what made a good podcast. And also there's a Tom Webster keynote speech on there as well. So just do a search for Podcast Movement on YouTube. And if you want to, you can still go in and buy all of the audio podcasts from the entire event. So if you want to hear me bluffing my way through an AI demonstration, then you can absolutely do that. I think it's $45 if you weren't there, and depending on the level of your ticket, you might find that it's free as well. So there's plenty of things to have a listen to, or indeed, as I plan to do, to read all of the transcripts from and see what was said.
Now you're off on your travels again, James. Where are you going?
I am. I'm going to Podcast Day Asia, which is happening early next week. It's part of part of Radio Days Asia in Kuala Lumpur, and it should be a really good couple of days. So yes, KL will be where I am next week, and KL will be possibly where this show comes from, depending on timing tomorrow, which we should talk about. So that should be a good time, I think.
Well, while you're in Kuala Lumpur, I will be in London at the London Podcast Festival, which starts also on September the 3rd. They've got some very interesting guests. They've got Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones, who's doing her podcast Frank Film Club. There's also Nick Grimshaw doing Dish Live. So I think I'll be looking at a couple of those shows. It goes on for a couple of weeks, I think. So yes, I'll be looking to see which podcast to go and listen to. Excellent.
Yes, it looks like a very good thing. And also Lower Street are running Lower Street office hours events. The first one is on September the 18th, Stephen Pratt. I don't know why I've just called him Stephen, because he's not called Stephen. Steve Pratt taking part in the first event, talking about his new book, Earn It, Unconventional Strategies for Brave Marketers. He'll be on this podcast, no doubt, during September as well. The book comes out on October the 1st. So worth taking a peek at that and worth signing up.
The tech stuff on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, it's the stuff you'll find every Monday in the Pod News newsletter. Here's where Sam talks technology. There is a bunch of new and exciting things going on, Sam. Tell me about Activity Pub.
Well, you know, I'm very gung-ho on Activity Pub. So are several other people. You were on the Podcasting 2.0 show talking about it quite a bit as well. John Spurlock last Friday released a new browser called the Activity Pub browser. You can find it at browser.pub, which is a really cool debugging tool for those building Activity Pub applications, because Activity Pub's been badly documented. I know there's a new book from Evan Prodimo coming out right now, but it's really hard to actually build good Activity Pub clients because the documentation doesn't support much of what you want to do. And so John, brilliant as he is, created this little browser that shows you all of the different fields and options and the JSON files. Yeah, so thank you, John Spurlock, is all I'd say.
No, it's very cool. Browser.pub is where to go there. If you want to fiddle around on the Fediverse, Threads has added a bit more to its Activity Pub integration. You can now see replies and things, and they're sort of very slowly getting into the whole Federation stuff, which is nice. There's also a new symbol for the Fediverse as well, which is three little stars. It's called an asterism, I believe, and it's a very cool and smart thing. I think it's a nice thing. So you'll notice on the Pod News website, I've got rid of the Mastodon logo in one place, or the silly old multicolored cat's cradle type Fediverse logo that is very hard to really understand what on earth is going on. That has also gone to be replaced by this nice new symbol. Instead, if you want to learn more about that, you can go to symbol.fediverse.info in your web browser, and you can learn a lot more about that. But to me, it looks like a good plan. And it's just a Unicode symbol, so therefore it's available in every single font already. So why not?
Just have to find out what the code is then. Now,
well, you just go to that website and you can just copy it. I mean, it really is as simple as that.
There we go. Nice and simple.
Yes,
okay.
super good.
Now, Olby, who provide the digital wallets that we use on True Fans and Podverse and Podcast Guru, they've now got sub-accounts. They've called them Uncle Jim's. That's completely an Americanism that I have no understanding of. But basically, you can set up an account for somebody else if you have an Olby hub. I'm not sure who's going to do that because I'm still not sure who the Olby hub is aimed at. I mean, yes, podcast apps like True Fans use the Olby hub, but I can't see power users using an Olby hub themselves. It seems such an overkill to set up in order to just have a wallet.
Yeah,
but,
and it costs money every single month for you to have one of these things, and I can't really see the benefit of it, to be honest. But perhaps it's the only way that they can operate that kind of service and remain within the law, I guess. But yes, a strange old thing, but worthwhile keeping an eye on, I guess. I published some research a while ago, but mentioned it again last week, mentioning that ID3 tags, waste of time, stop doing them. Whether that's ID3 tags because you think that they're good for SEO, they're not. I've done the work, they're not. They're not being used in SEO at all. Or whether or not they're any good in podcast players, they are not used in podcast players at all, unless you really want to support some very old 15-year-old hardware players. My recommendation to you, if you're worrying about what your ID3 tags look like, is to stop worrying because it's a complete waste of time. The Pod News Daily has proper ID3 tags. That's nice. And this show, I believe, has proper ID3 tags because Buzzsprout, our sponsor, actually writes them into the audio file. So hooray for Buzzsprout for doing that. But really, no need to, because there isn't anything really that uses those tags anymore. So stop bothering about them is my humble opinion.
So what's happened with your favourite podcasting app, James?
Well, they've brought back a couple of new features. This is Overcast, of course, and they brought back a couple of new features. Smart Speed now actually shows what speed it's currently playing at, which is always quite fun and quite geeky to look at. And it's also brought back streaming playback, which was quite a surprise. Seemingly, Marco got enough gripes and moans from people saying that streaming playback or a progressive download, if we're going to be strictly technologically accurate, is a good thing. So yes, that is back in Overcast. I'll continue using it because it's got the best fast speed thing, although Pocket Cast is very good, and I'm sure the True Fans is very good too.
No, it's not. No.
No?
No, I'm not going to claim we have it, but we haven't got any secret source behind it, so I'm not going to claim anything there. I'm looking forward to the day that Overcast has one single Podcasting 2.0 feature, which will be lovely.
Yes.
But until that day, yes, it's a legacy app to me.
Yes. Well, and to be honest, I would agree with you. I would like to see more from that side. And, I'm looking at Pocket Casts every now and again and going, maybe I should go back to that. Maybe I should. Who knows? Pocket Casts has an Apple Watch logo that actually works and various other things. So, that might be a good thing. So anyway, yes, Overcast. What else is going on? OP3 is nice. OP3 is a free and independent podcast analytics tool that you can use, dear listener, and that you should be using. And if you are not a chicken, as Todd Cochran is, then you can publish your numbers. I accused him of being a chicken to his face for not publishing the numbers for the new media show through OP3, and he just looked at me and he went, bark, 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 bark. So I'm assuming that he is a chicken. Anyway, he has added not Todd, but John, who runs OP3, has added a top African regions box. If you are a podcaster with more than 3% of your traffic in Africa, it'll now tell you exactly where that's coming from, which is quite cool. So worthwhile taking a look at that. There's also a simple plugin to enable OP3 if you're using micro.blog, which is a weird and wonderful platform that you can host podcasts on if you really want to. And there's a bunch of other things going on with OP3 as well. So worth a peek at that. And finally, congratulations, Audio Means IAB version 2.2 certified status, and they are the first hosting company to achieve certification in all 4 IAB certified metrics. So congratulations to them. Omni Studio and Headliner have partnered to get customer podcasts onto YouTube, and new data from Scientia Mobile telling us that Android now has 66% share of the global smartphone market and iOS 33%, which I believe is a record for Android. Could be wrong, but I believe it's a record for Android. So hurrah for Android, I guess.
Just quickly going back to that Audio Means, it's one of the 4 elements. They have client-confirmed ad play.
Yes.
Remind me again how they do that when it's a download.
Well, it calls itself the most accurate count for ad plays in a podcast, but it does require client-side tracking. So it's not just downloads, it's other things as well. So essentially you need to, if you play it back, for example, in a player on your website, so a player on the Audio Means website in that particular case, then they can actually measure how much of the ads have been played. That's where the client confirmed ad play comes from. If you read the IAB specification, it says that currently less than 3% of players are capable of providing this kind of data. So relatively useless, but Audio Means at least has done the work on their own embedded player so that they can measure client-confirmed ad plays on those. But that's not the world's most exciting thing, is it?
No. Let's move on to something much more exciting. It's Boostergram Corner.
Boostergram Corner on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, it's our favourite time of the week. It's Boostergram Corner, and anything that we make from this goes straight to Sam and me. It doesn't go to the rest of the massive Pod News team, whoever they are. And thank you for your boosts. This is also where we go and we mention any boosts from the Pod News Daily podcast as well, which you can also boost and stream your sats to. Matt Kundle, 5,150 sats. It's probably a number. Don't know what that number is. Anyway, he says, great seeing you in Washington. I think he's talking to me. Thanks for the AI tool tips. Fun watching you record the show from the expo floor. Yes, it was fun doing it. So Matt, thank you very much. And thank you for taking that photograph, which we've used all over the place of me doing it. So that was a nice thing.
John McDermott, he sent 4,444 sats. Okay, I don't mean to be cheap, lol. Here's double ducks to make up for last week's cheapness. Yes, thank you, John.
Yes, he does a very good blog. If you do a quick search for John McDermott podcast blog, then you'll find it. And he does do quite a good piece about how complicated all of this streaming sats malarkey is, which I think that we should all read and remember that, yes, it is still hugely complicated. Anyway, as part of that, he says that he learned last week that his boost of 200 sats was cheap, which was about 12 cents. So the double ducks, the 4,444 sats is around $3. Hopefully James and Sam can live large on that, but at least it seems socially acceptable. John, thank you. And a number of other messages from John as well. 200 sats saying, how far tech has come. 2 continents recording live with one guy walking around a convention centre. Sounds great. I miss you, Switch 56. Any idea what Switch 56 is, Sam?
No idea. I thought you, being a radio nerd, would have told me, actually.
No, well, John is an ex radio person, and so he probably understands what Switch 56 is. Wikipedia tells me that it was a networking protocol built on telephone cabling hardware by Nortel, and it's basically kind of ISDN-ish. It would carry 56 kilobits of data on its lines. There we go. There's a thrill. I'm imagining that they must have used that for outside broadcasts at the radio station that he once worked for. And he's also sent a True Fans Zap which I'm not quite sure what a true fan zap is. What is a true fan zap, Sam?
It's when you heart something, you just want to send quick 10 sats. Yep, I'm hearting this. Yeah,
Nice.
so you get 10 sats for doing that.
Very nice. Have we had sats from anybody else?
We've had it from the pod sage himself. Dave Jones sent 10,000 sats and he simply said, thanks for all you guys do. So thank you very much,
thank
Dave.
you, Dave Jones. And it was a great pleasure. I was on the Podcasting 2.0 show last week from a random airport lounge. Super enjoyed doing that. That was great fun. And super enjoyed also putting my Umbral hub through its paces because, of course, when you are on that show, then they split the sats with you. And so, crikey, my little hub has been going, oh, all these people, all these connections. So that was a wonderful thing. Hugely enjoyed being on with Dave and with Adam, and sort of ever so gently taking the piss out of Adam, which I think he hopefully got. So super enjoyable. Thank you for that. Also, thank you to those who are listening just with streaming sats. They haven't bothered pressing the boost button, but that's still fine. Brian Ensminger, the late bloomer actor, Adam Curry himself, Dave Jackson, Brian of London, and Kyrin, and a few more as well. So thank you for listening and streaming sats. Much appreciated. Thank you also to the Magnificent Seven, our power supporters: Cy Jobling, Rachel Corbett, Dave Jackson, Mike Hamilton, Matt Medeiros, Marshall Brown, and Cameron Moll. So what's happened for you this week, Sam?
Well, I'm looking forward to 2 conferences coming up this month.
Are you really?
I am actually, yeah.
Go on.
Meta's Connect conference, because I love my sunglasses and I want to see what they do with the next version. They're bringing out an AR, augmented reality version of the glasses. So that's going to be interesting to see what they do there. And Apple's Glow event on the 9th of September. Obviously, James, you'll be upgrading to the iPhone 16 Pro Max.
No? Not sure I will be. Yeah, we'll see.
I got interviewed by Matthew Passy on his show Podcasting Tech, talking about Podcasting 2.0 and everything to do with TrueFan. So you can listen to it on his podcast or find it on YouTube. And I also got interviewed by Neil Mackay for Smarter Podcasting, talking about very similar things, Podcasting 2.0, and also you can see that on YouTube as well. The other thing I'm talking to is Gotham Anand over in India about doing a Podcasting Desi event in India in February 2025. I'm also hoping to do one in South Africa. James, you will be included, don't worry.
Gosh. Well, that's all very exciting, isn't it? Are you planning to actually be in India and in South Africa, or is that your plan?
Yes, I am. Yeah, that's the idea. I think what we want to try and do is again, it goes back to what you and I were trying to do many months ago, maybe even a couple of years ago, with podcasting live for this show. And, you know, we didn't extend that. But I think there's a demand. I've been talking to John Savage and to Gotham, and they would love to have events in their country. So they'll be finding venues, sponsors, and you and I are going to be invited to go along and say a few words.
Well, that'll be fun. I haven't been to India for a long, long time, so that will be good fun to go back there, and indeed go back to South Africa, which I haven't been to for a long, long time. Yes, all sounds good.
So what's happened for you, James?
So I, apart from being on Podcasting 2.0 and apart from trying to get rid of my jet lag, which is much harder on the way back than it is on the way there, I'll tell you. But apart from those two things, I was on the BBC yesterday, which is very exciting, live on a global news channel from this very office. The people from Lewitt Microphones, I notice, have just sent me an email because they were thrilled seeing their microphone. It's the one thing that I didn't cover up, because I know how the BBC are like with brands and things. What I should have done is I should have covered up the brand, but I didn't. So they were delighted to end up seeing that. But that was great fun. If you're a media geek and you would like to learn a little bit more about what it's like actually going live on the BBC, on the TV channel, then I have something in my personal blog. Just do a web search. which explains how they do it. But very interesting experience doing that. I put on a suit and tie and everything. I was still wearing jeans. you couldn't see that under the table.
With a sign on the door saying "Do not disturb." Yes.
Yes, exactly. No, but that was good fun. So I enjoyed doing that. Hopefully, if I did a good enough job, I'll be asked back again. But we will see.
Yes, down to the colonies to find out the word about podcasting.
I'm sure that's how it works. And that's it for this week. If you enjoy the podcast, the newsletter's better. You can find it. By the way, I've heard Dave Jackson saying that 3 times in an English accent. The newsletter's better. Which is very amusing. But yes, if you enjoy the podcast, the newsletter's better. You can find it at podnews.net and also find the Pod News Daily wherever you get your podcasts. I've just extended the RSS feed of that so that instead of just being the last 50 shows, it's all 2,000 of them.
Wow.
So yes, it's beginning. It's gosh, my CloudFront went absolutely mad as lots of people downloaded every single one of those. So that'll be fun. Anyway, there are longer interviews as well in the Pod News Extra podcast as well.
You can support this show by streaming Sats. You can give us feedback using the fan mail link, which we did actually forgot to mention. We got Jordan, who sent us a lovely fan mail link saying, yes, she thought it was a shame I didn't make it over to Washington. Yes, it was a shame. But thank you, Jordan. I'll see you over in Chicago, probably. You can also send us a boostergram, or you can become a PAL supporter at weekly.podnews.net.
Our music is from Studio Dragonfly. Our voiceover is Sheila D. We use Clean Feed for this, and we're hosted and sponsored by Buzzsprout. Start podcasting. Start podcasting. Keep podcasting.
Get updated every day. Subscribe to our newsletter at podnews.net. Tell your friends and grow the show.
And support us.
The Pod News Weekly Review will return next week. Keep listening.